This podcast provides a platform to discuss important questions and complex issues, challenge the status quo, and confront the boundaries of the establishment. I'm retired police chief Daniel Hahn. I went from being arrested at 16 to serving over 34 years in law enforcement. My goal is to keep you informed with news not being reported, voices not being heard, and the untold history of how we got here so that we can create a way forward. Here with Nancy Atchley on A Way Forward as our special guest, ultimately from Powerhouse Ministries. But before we get started, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your upbringing and how you eventually landed in Folsom, starting this, what I think people will think is a pretty amazing program.
Yeah, I kind of have an unconventional, with the kind of work that I do, people would not guess the background that I come from, but I came from probably a upper middle class family. My husband was in construction management and he was out of work. It was a time of downturn in the construction industry. He took a job working for a construction management company that was hired by the state of California to manage the construction of the new Folsom prison.
Oh,
so
okay.
We moved up from Southern California, had 3 days to buy a house in crazy place called Folsom, and moved into our house. And the next day was a Sunday. We were going to go to church, and my husband said, I want to go see the construction site. So we drove up there, and I had never seen anything like what I saw that day. There was women, children, men lined up to visit their loved ones at Folsom Prison.
Would have been at the old Folsom.
Yes, the old
one
Folsom
we see
prison.
in the movies.
Right. I had never seen anything like that. And my heart just broke. And we were on our way to church, and I said to my husband, what are we doing going to church in a building? This is where the church needs to be. And then I kind of forgot about it, moved into our new house, got my oldest son into school. And 3 years later, I was 9 months pregnant with my youngest son. And we were going to a church that was going through a split. And I was complaining to God, and I heard this voice say, why haven't you done what I showed you when you first moved up here? And I saw that picture. And I fell asleep. I've learned since then that when you're 9 months pregnant, you should not take your dreams seriously. However, I didn't know that, so I had this dream that I started this place called Powerhouse Ministries, where people were coming, and women, children, mostly women and children, and they were changing their lives. And then the next scene, they were going into the prison, and they were affecting the culture in the prison in a huge way. And that was affecting the whole city. And so, what do you do when you wake up from a dream like that, right?
I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah, so I began to share with people, I had this dream, I don't know what to do, and found out about a woman that was gathering inmates' wives in front of an apartment complex in Folsom. And I didn't realize then, but learned that a lot of these families had moved to Folsom to be near their loved ones in Folsom Prison. Right. And I began to meet with them, brought my kids, found out there was such incredible poverty in the midst. These kids, they had never been across the river in Folsom, had never been swimming. So I was a mom of young kids, and I just started bringing their kids with my kids to Folsom Lake to go swimming, and began to build a relationship with these families, and found just these children were being raised, never knowing anything except a prison visiting room and the drug alley behind their apartment building.
So I'm curious, with the news and everything, and we see some of the crimes that people commit, what some human beings will do to other human beings. Mm-hmm. And what I find is there's a lot of fear around people that are incarcerated, especially in the prisons. Some of it probably justified at times, and others is just kind of part of a larger stereotype. So what I heard you just say is that you come from an upper middle class family in Southern California, and you came to Sacramento and ran across people either in or associated with people that were in prison, and you took your own children and started spending time with them. Why in the world would you do that? And the reason I ask is what you would want people to know about your experience doing that, because there's nothing more than we typically cherish more than our own children. And here you are taking your children around people who are incarcerated and the families of those incarcerated.
I guess I saw the pain and I saw the hopelessness for the children. And that was originally, the hopelessness of the children grabbed my heart. For the women, a lot of the reason that they had married these men in prison was because they had been abused all their life. And this was a way for them to be safe because the guy was locked up.
So they couldn't, oh, wow.
So they could have the security of I'm married and that sense I'm loved without the pain. And then as their husbands would get out, we had guys that had gotten out of prison at our house a lot. They helped us build a pool in our backyard and taught my boys how to make fireworks. That was I paid that price for a while, blown up mailbox, all kinds of things. Our garage was a little scary. But what I found out, I found out that 100% of the men that I met that were violent, they had been molested as little boys. And I remember one boy, he said, I decided one night, he said, I slept with a baseball bat because of what would happen to me at night. And one night, he said, I decided I will never be the victim again. And
so then he became the perpetrator.
He became that. He was in prison for rape. And, but through our relationship, he met the Lord. He had his wife, they had a couple kids together, and, their family it became pretty healthy considering everything that they had been through. And I think trauma is a thing. I've seen that in the homeless. I've seen that in the drug addiction community too. When you get to hear people's stories, I go, man, would I have been able to endure that?
Right. So there's a real person underneath the trauma.
There is.
Yeah. So before we move on, what do you think that did for your small children?
Yeah. Well, it was quite it was really tough for them, I think, because on the one hand, I had them in private Christian school because I didn't really want them going to school with the same kids that we were working with. And so they had that upbringing. And then we had gangs in Folsom at that time. And so they would witness some gang fights and different things like that. So they grew up not really fitting in either culture. And I think that was really difficult for them. I remember one of my sons had a birthday party and invited his friends from Capital Christian School and the kids from Powerhouse together. It was very interesting. And actually, you'd have to talk to my youngest son now, works with me in the ministry, and he's actually leading with me. And he'll tell you some of the crazy stories. He says he was held hostage in the ministry for all these years. But
something must have rubbed off if he's working in the same.
He is, and he has incredible compassion. And he's got street smarts as well as, really having some valuable things to bring to these kids.
So I know at one point you felt inadequate and unqualified for this work. And we'll get into a little bit about what Powerhouse Ministry does. But why did you feel that you were inadequate and unqualified to do some of the stuff you've already talked about?
I was a mom. I had worked I had done some executive secretary work. I was trained as a kindergarten teacher. This wasn't my field.
I take it you'd never been to a prison.
Never been to a prison. Nope. Never knew anybody who had been in prison. And so I didn't know what I was doing, but the thing is, the first time I met with a group of these women, I felt like I was home. I can't even describe it. I just knew that was where I was supposed to be. And there's something that we all have in common as humans, and it's pain.
So because I think all of us at some point in our life face a challenge or something in our lives where we feel inadequate or unqualified for whatever it is we're trying to do or accomplish. Maybe it's a new job, whatever. So how did you overcome that? Was it just because you felt you belonged, or was it more than that allowed you to push through those feelings and accomplish some of the things we'll talk about in a minute?
Yeah, it was definitely more than that. I remember the day that I was praying for my own kids, and I really felt the Lord speak to me. you know how you feel about your kids. That's how I feel about mine. And I really felt God's heart for people that believed that he was mad at them, that their whole life was a punishment from him, and that he desperately wanted them to know how much he loved them. And that was my motivation. And I went knowing that, and that was about it. And I wanted to share that with them, and I wanted to be that with them. And that's part of the reason I brought my own kids, because I knew that they were ostracized in our community in Folsom. And to be able to come and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to allow my kids to play with you, was that gave me an entry into their lives.
So I'm also curious, so your husband and you come up here because he's now part of building what we now know of as New Folsom and a few other names. How did he feel about your dreams and the things you were attempting to accomplish early on?
Yeah, he was like, I can't have any part in that. I'm building a prison. But then when I began gathering gang members on the street, and they started wanting me to come and work with some of their friends, he said, you're not doing this alone. So he started bringing pizzas on Thursday nights for...
So you roped him into it.
He started doing it. Well, he was like, yeah, you can't do this by yourself. And then down the road, the prison went back to redesign, and he was laid off. And so he began doing that full time with me. And then 5 years later, he died of lymphoma.
So talk a little bit about all that you do through Powerhouse Ministry, like what programs, what services, what do you provide to the community that you serve?
Well, number one, we want to be that place that anybody can come, whether they are on drugs, whether they're homeless, whatever, where they can find a family and meet people and have healthy connection. You know, they've learned recently that the opposite of addiction is actually not sobriety, it's connection. And so one of the things we do best at Powerhouse is be family to people that have no healthy connections. So we do lots of outreach programs. We have a Sunday night program where all of our programs, we have dinner, and we gather children, we gather teens, we gather adults, and we bring hope to them that, hey, you know what, there is a possibility of a life beyond this. And then we have residential programs. One of the things we found was a lot of people really wanted to change, but they couldn't change. And we can't make people want to change, but once they do want to change, we feel like that is our obligation to help make them able to change. So our Women and Children's program is for homeless addicted women, and they have to be ready and willing to do whatever it takes to change. And it's a hard program. It's 2 years. First year is working on what got you in this position.
And I assume there's relapses involved in all that and that sort of thing?
There are. And we're a grace-based program. So when a person relapses, they have to leave immediately because they've made the environment unsafe, but they can call and come back, and then we talk about what happened and is this still a good place for you, and what do you need to do differently.
So you didn't just throw them? Okay.
No, we don't. And then we have, every woman has case management. We do relapse prevention. We do life skills and relationship skills, boundaries, and all of that. And we work through some of those unhealthy things that have caused them. You know, all addictions are about medicating pain. So let's go to the source. Let's get the pain. Let's deal with it.
And how do the people that you work with and serve and basically live with, how do they come to you? How does Powerhouse Ministries and people that have that desire and willingness and need come together?
Well, some of them come through CPS. We're pretty well known in the courts. And some of them come through jails or prisons. They contact us. Some of it is word on the street. Some of it is through graduates of our program that they've known. We're a lot of word of mouth.
And you have different locations, right, where people can come to?
So we have our Women and Children Center is a 40-bed facility in Folsom. But then we also have another facility that is for men that we just started in November. And then we have a leadership college, because one of the things I found after doing this for 30 years is that I watched this cycle repeat itself. of children.
Generationally, you mean?
Yes, children of addicts ended up, or parents that were in prison, they ended up repeating that cycle. So we have a leadership college for 18 to 24-year-olds. We want to get kids right out of high school. We, for years in our youth group, had been telling them, you can do anything with your life, but the truth was they couldn't. When they would turn 18, they no longer had a welfare check for mom to take care of them, and mom would say, go get a job at McDonald's or get out of my house. So they were homeless, running drugs, and we said, no, we can't give kids hope without giving them help, because otherwise that's cruel. So we have 2 different houses for kids, one for young men, one for young women. And then we have a drop-in center for homeless and people that are still, on the streets and struggling. So I think in all we have 6 facilities right now.
Yeah, not too long ago, I had the privilege of going on a tour of a couple of those facilities, and it struck me the one, and I don't remember what you call it, but the newer looking house with multiple families living there, that wasn't what I expected to see. Like most of the time I see facilities, they look very kind of stale, but this looked like anybody's house, looked very comfortable, and the people that were living there felt like, just from an outsider looking in, kind of seemed like a family all together. I'm sure you probably have plenty of drama, just like any house has plenty of drama. My house has plenty of drama at times. But what is the importance of it really looking like a home with couches? And I mean, it looked like anybody's living room. And how do you accomplish this, what at least I perceived as like a family, even though it's multiple families, it's kind of more like a big family, which families fight, so I'm sure there's drama.
That's right. Well, one of the things that we wanted was when people would come into the program, if you're going to go into a 2-year residential program for addiction, you've burned every other bridge. No family member is going to fund you, so everything we do is free. And pretty much it's like, okay, here I go again, number 6. And we wanted them to come in and just feel this overwhelming sense of, I am valuable and people actually believe in me. And we want our facility to reflect that. So our facility, our Women and Children Center, is beautiful. Actually, all of our facilities are beautiful. And I think when you give people value, they rise to the occasion. And when you talk about drama, the interesting thing is we put a lot of value in culture. People have to feel safe in order to change. And so we kind of phase letting people in so that we have senior residents that kind of set the culture. This is a culture where we're honest, where we're vulnerable, where we treat each other with respect. We hang the keys to our van on the wall where, any woman could take it.
Wow.
But they don't. Because when you trust people, they actually rise to that. And
you're actually valuing them.
Yeah.
Trusting them, yeah.
Yeah. And then we're vulnerable with them too. We don't want, I'm sorry, I know police officer and all of that, but we don't want to be the police officers, right, because we want to go, you know what? We have struggles too. And so we're vulnerable about our own struggles. So we have a give and take relationship.
So speaking of that, what would you say with all that you have done, and we'll get into some of the successes because I think it's been very successful, I'm sure not without its challenges. But what do you say to the people that would go, look, if you did a crime, you need to go to prison. And if you're doing drugs, you need to get arrested and go to jail or prison. Why are we spending all this money and time on these people that have clearly either broken the law or done things that is not healthy, not only for themselves, but it's not healthy for my community? And so why are we wasting our time on this? I imagine you've heard that before. I know in a very divisive kind of environment that we live in now, I hear it a lot on both sides.
Sure.
So what would somebody that works in this every day and has created some really useful services in the community, what would your answer be to somebody that legitimately believes that?
I think that there's a place for that. I think that obviously if a person is a danger to others, There's definitely a place for prison, and sometimes those places can become the catalyst to change, because people only change when the pain of whatever their behavior is becomes greater than the pain that it's anesthetizing. So there's a place for some of that. However, I think what I saw originally was that the people that were caught in that cycle actually didn't have a choice. It was generational. And the cry of my heart was, we have to raise up a choice, a place where people that actually want to get out can get out. And that's really what we're looking for. Everything we do at Powerhouse, we do some mercy things of here's a sleeping bag, but we're always looking for who are the people that are saying, I want out. Because when they do, we want to be there to help them. And there are a lot of them that do, but they don't know. First of all, maybe they've just been in survival mode their whole life. They don't know what's different. They can't see a way out.
So what I hear you saying is if somebody is ready and they want help, it's not useful to tell them to come back in a couple months and we'll be ready to help you.
No.
I've always thought that. So
Yeah.
now I have somebody that works in it confirm it. So I think in some portions of your all the different work that you do, I've read that there was a 91% success rate or some ridiculously high
I know.
success rate in, I think, your transformation center. What is that center, and how do you, I mean, there's very few things in the world that has like 90+% success rate. So how is that, how have you, and obviously many other people accomplished that?
So that is our Women and Children's Center, yes, because it's been in existence the longest. And
what is the success? Like, how do you count what's a success?
so we say they don't return to a life of addiction. Doesn't mean they never have a relapse, but it means they don't continue to that as a lifestyle.
Right.
They get help. I think there's a lot of reasons. Our situation, because a lot of recovery programs, you go through the program and then you graduate and you're disconnected. But we don't go away. So we are there before you want help, we're there when you want help, and then we're there after. So we have our Sunday night gathering is a gathering of graduates, people that just started. So there's a place to come home to. And for a lot of our people, there's no safety net. So we just had a woman who went through our program, graduated, and then had some real physical challenges. We were there to help with her kids during that. She'd moved out. She was, in her own place and everything. Brought meals, were able to help with her rent because she wasn't in the kind of job where she was going to get help with, her income when she couldn't work.
Something that like a family would do for their family members, right?
And I think that's a huge part of it. So we help build, and the women from day one start building a connection. They have contact with over 500 volunteers while they're in our program that they can build relationship with, so that we encourage them to get in a church besides Powerhouse. So they're building this connection, and we stay there in the mix with them. So that's a huge part of it. The other thing is our relapse prevention program that we use that actually empowers women to be in charge of their own relapse. They know at least 2 weeks before they relapse that they're in danger. And so that's a tool that we teach them that helps them to be able to monitor that through their life. And we do have an alumni group where we're constantly checking in. We meet once a month to go, hey, how are you doing in this, and how can we support you?
So these are folks that have lived experiences that might be somewhat similar to the people they're helping, the alumni program?
The alumni is the people that have graduated our program that can come back and meet with some of our counselors once a month. We go, how are you doing? What's happening? Oh, you lost your job, or you had a breakup in this relationship. Okay, let's talk about, how are you doing and how can we support you? So it doesn't go away.
So you're somebody not from Sacramento area, didn't have experience with somebody in prison or in a lot of other maybe addiction and things like that. And now you become like, this is like your calling, your ministry to the community of something that you weren't familiar with necessarily growing up and as a young adult. So what would you want people similar to yourself that might not have experience with either a prison or people that were in prison or addiction? What, through all your experience, if you were just to say a couple of things, what is it that you'd want people that haven't had these experiences, so their experience might be from the news or stories they hear, what would you want them to know now that you have been doing this for so many years?
I think that people that are acting out in unhealthy ways are desperate for relationship. And you know what? You don't have to have gone through what they've gone through. I think they're desperate for honest relationships. They're desperate for people that will listen to them. I've noticed with our children that come to our youth group, a lot of people think, oh, you have to be a teenager to relate to at-risk youth. No, you don't. They need parents. And same thing with adults in this. They need caring adults that will listen. They need somebody that will actually share some of their own pain. That's the one thing we all have in common. I might not have had addiction. I had a husband who died. I have pain, and I know how to share that. And that there's a connection that happens in that. So I want to just break that fallacy that you have to come out of that. In fact, sometimes it's better if you didn't. Because when people that are trapped in addiction learn that they can have a good relationship with what they call a normie, it actually prepares them to build those other relationships and to go, okay, I can relate to this person. So I would encourage you to give of your time in places where you can actually make a difference. And I would say especially with children and teens. We don't remove kids from homes nearly as often anymore. When I started this 30 years ago, it used to happen all the time. Now we leave children in drug-addicted homes. And we have a whole generation of kids that are growing up as orphans. I think this is one of the reasons that we have the homeless population we do, and it's not really talked about, but it's really true. We're leaving kids in homes where they're having to parent their brothers and sisters. And when they grow up, they're going to do exactly the same thing because they never got to be kids. They're carrying all this trauma. They need parents. They need caring adults that will invest in them.
Amen. So I want to end on this. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your passion and your journey, essentially, because I think that really helps people understand what goes on in all of our communities. So if somebody was to listen to this and be inspired by your journey and the work that you and so many others do, and they might have been somebody that has wanted to help, but they live busy lives, they have kids that they got to get to practice, and they just never have known how to help. For that person that's inspired by this today, how can they help?
Well, I know for us, we do a lot of community-wide events. In just a few weeks at Easter, we're going to be dropping, I don't know how many eggs, but some obscene amount of eggs from a helicopter and putting on like a little carnival. I would advise you to, first of all, at Powerhouse, you can call, get in contact with our volunteer coordinator, be a part of a large event, just kind of get your feet wet. Meet some people. We do a huge event at Christmas, a big shopping mall thing that you could get involved in, and just begin to get to know some of the people. Our Sunday night service is open. That's at 5 o'clock every Sunday night at Mount Olive Lutheran Church. We rent that facility, and that's a great place to come have dinner and just get a feel for who these people are. And then from there, we have all kinds of volunteer opportunities that we would love to get you involved in, depending on what your interest is and your skill.
And do you have a website that they would start to look at to be able to make that phone call?
Yes,
what would
it's
that be?
phmfolsom.org.
Awesome. phmfolsom.org. Well, thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I had already met you once. And thank you for sharing your story and what you do. And more importantly, thank you for what you do, because I'm a firm believer that we can't leave any portion of our community behind. One of the big purposes of A Way Forward is to hear different voices and different opinions, because that is how we can make informed decisions ourselves. So if you are someone that would like to come on A Way Forward to express your opinion, go to chiefhahn.com/podcast. chiefhahn.com/podcast.